Hello, everybody. I had the opportunity and the privilege today to speak with Mr. Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of Canada's federal Conservative Party, but also, barring catastrophe and God willing, Canada's next Prime Minister. A transition in power in this country is likely to take place sometime between March and October or November of 2025.
Welcome back, everyone. Now, before we dive into this riveting chat with Pierre Poilievre, let's take a moment to reflect on why, for the love of maple syrup and poutine, Canada might just need an election sooner rather than later. You see, being a Canadian, for the past few years, we've been navigating the Trudeau Express, a ride so wild, it makes Canada Wonderland look like a kiddie park. Under Trudeau's watch, housing prices have skyrocketed so high, even the CN Tower is feeling insecure, and our economy? It's on a diet it didn't even sign up for, shrinking faster than a snowman in April. But don't worry, folks, there's a light at the end of this tunnel. And it's not a train coming our way, it's Pierre Poilievre, the man with a plan, or some might say, the heir presumptive to the Prime Minister's seat. Rumor has it, Trudeau might be stepping down here in the coming weeks, or by the end of January, probably to fulfill his lifelong dream of opening up a boutique yoga studio, and perhaps a sock emporium. And while he's busy perfecting Downward Dog, Canadians are eager for a leader who'll steer us back on the right track. So grab your Timbits, settle in, and let's listen to Pierre Poilievre, the man who might just make Canada great again, at least get us back to affording avocado toast without a second mortgage. Let's jump in.
And it appears very probable that Pierre Poilievre is the heir presumptive and will be the next Prime Minister of Canada. And so I talked to Mr. Poilievre 2.5 years ago, which was quite shocking to me. I thought it had been more recently than that. And a lot has transpired in the meantime. What did I talk about with Pierre? Well, I think mostly what I did was give Canadians and people on the international side a chance to see who this man is in an hour and a half of discussion, and the extra half an hour on the Daily Wire side. You have enough time to get a sense of how someone responds spontaneously and emotionally and cognitively to complex and challenging questions in a manner that's not rehearsed. That's the huge advantage of the podcast format. We talked about all the stories that Mr. Poilievre has heard in his thousands of event interactions with Canadians in industrial settings, in manufacturing settings, in academic settings, so that he could inform himself about the true situation that's facing Canadians struggling to make ends meet, despite their best efforts now, which is a dismal reality in Canada with its excessive housing prices and diminishing economy. Most importantly, perhaps, what is his vision of the future that both threatens and provides opportunity for Canadians? How is it possible for the citizens of this great country to dig themselves out of the malaise and pit that has been dug for them and by them over the last 9 years, and what could be done to remove the impediments such that this country could become the dynamic industrial powerhouse that it certainly could easily become. So join us for all that. So, sir, it's been almost 2.5 years since we sat down to talk the time before. So I guess the first thing I'd like to know is, what have you been doing during that time? I'd like to hear about your day-to-day schedule and your week-to-week schedule. Like, lay out your job.
Basically, we have two parts to my professional life. It's very bifurcated. There's the Parliament Hill side, which is, early morning meeting with my leadership team, House Leader, Deputy Leader, Whip, etc., to plan out the day, the battle plan for our parliamentary committees, question period, etc. That is punctuated by one weekly caucus meeting and just the daily prosecution of the government, which is the quintessential role of an opposition leader. And then the other part to my life is touring. I asked my assistant today how many events we had done over the last year, and he said it was exactly 600. I mean, a few weeks ago it was 570 something. So we've done 600 events, and those are like tours at mills, mines, factories, farms, high-tech facilities. And we tour in, see how the place operates, Then I give a short speech, do a question and answer, and then I just mull about and shake hands with the workers for 25 minutes to an hour, and then I go on to the next stop and do it all over again. And we did that in 9 provinces and 2 territories this year. And so that's a summary of my workload and work plan to do my job.
And you said 600 events. You made allusion when we were driving over here that the weekends are particularly packed, that you'll do like 10 events on Saturday or Sunday.
Right.
And so what a typical event, what do you enjoy about the events? Why are they useful? And what do you learn?
Well, first of all, you get a practical insight into how the country actually works. Like who makes the widgets? How do those get made? How does our supply chain come together? What skill sets do these incredible workers have? What background qualified them to be a licensed welder, or to run a CNC machine, or to be the CEO of a 300-person company that supplies parts into the American economy? And that practical insight, I think, is important if you want to lead a government and a national economy. So you learn a lot. Then I get to hear the stories of the people who work in these places and get their feedback on what they want, what their dreams and aspirations are.
Yeah, I want to turn to that in some detail. Let me ask you about the parliamentary side too, because I think it'd be useful for people to know how you prepare for what you do in Parliament. It isn't obvious to me that people exactly understand the business of being in opposition, at a really practical level.
Right.
What do you see as your major function? I know you're there to push back against the government and to question and criticize, but it isn't obvious how you go about preparing for that, or how you decide what issues you're going to focus on, and how you distribute the responsibilities among your caucus and your broader team.
So, there's a lot of discretion. You make up your mind when you wake up in the morning. You read the news. You see, I have a team that gives me a full briefing of all the published news from the mainstream media, all the news from the independent and ethnic media, all a download of the entire social media landscape. And then I respond to that by saying, well, I think these are we have roughly 25 questions we can ask. And I'll say, well, I want 10 on inflation, and 3 on violent crime, and 4 on whatever the subject happens to be in the day. And I want this committee to focus on this today, and that committee to focus on that today. And then our teams go out and we do it. And I've been very blessed because my caucus is extremely talented and they don't need a lot of direction. But we've been acting in unison, and I think that's why our message is pumping out so clearly to people. It's not a cacophony of sound, it's a clear drumbeat. And that's why people are hearing and appreciating our message.
So you feel that your party is well organized at the moment?
Extremely well organized.
Okay, so what's your evidence for that?
Well, by every measure, by every statistical measure, we're stronger than any political party has been in, well, maybe in my lifetime, objectively speaking. Memberships, fundraising, poll numbers.
Right, so people are positive in consequence of that. So it's a lot easier to lead an organization when it's successful.
That's
obviously,
right.
People are much more enthusiastic.
Yes.
Why do you think you're in that position? What's going on that's setting the stage for that? And I don't just mean the failures on the Trudeau side. I mean, what do you think you guys are doing right?
Well, we have a clearer mission statement, and people know exactly why we're in this. Whenever someone asks me, if they say, I'm thinking of running for parliament or for mayor or some other political position, what's your advice? Well, I say, well, before I get to the advice, I have a very simple question. Why do you want this job? Mm-hmm. And it might seem like a simplistic question, but it's actually the most important question in life. Why? Why are you doing what you're doing? And our answer to that is to bring back the Canadian promise.
Pierre's vision for Canada is as bold as it is refreshing, and honestly, it's about time someone stepped up to the plate with a plan of action that actually makes sense. While Trudeau's leadership has left Canadians reeling with skyrocketing house prices, a floundering economy, and a lack of meaningful action, Pierre has been out there literally shaking hands with workers, listening to real Canadians, and understanding how the country actually operates. He's visited mills, factories, farms, and tech companies to learn what makes a Canadian economy tick, instead of just sitting around in a parliament throwing out press releases. His message: get back to the basics, with his clear mission to restore the Canadian promise. Pierre is ready to turn things around. After all, when you've seen firsthand how the engine of the economy works, you're in much better position to fix the broken parts. Unlike Trudeau's laziest, fairy approach of things will work themselves out, Pierre is taking charge, listening to the people, addressing inflation, tackling crime, and prepping for a future where Canada isn't just surviving, but thriving. Honestly, it's hard to imagine voting for anyone else at this point, unless of course you enjoy watching your country turn into a real-life case study, how to mismanage an entire economy.
That anyone who works hard gets a great paycheck and a pension that buys them good food and a nice home and a safe neighborhood, that anyone from anywhere can do anything, and that people are in charge of their own lives. That's effectively what we want to deliver. So every day when I'm in Parliament...
So that's a very local vision in a sense, right? It doesn't have that the grandiosity of an international utopian vision, for example.
Well, maybe
it's very down to earth.
I think people are sick and tired of grandiosity. In fact, I think there's something grand about a family that can go on a nice road trip and share stories and build lasting memories that the kids will remember when they're 85 years old.
Despite
I think that's
producing all that nasty carbon dioxide.
That's right. But I think those things are grand. And I think with the problem we've had in this country and in all of the countries that have been afflicted by this horrendous utopian wokeism is that it's been focused on the grandiosity of the leadership, of the egotistical personalities on top, and not the things that are grand and great about the common people. And that is another reason why I think we're doing very well. People are saying finally there's someone who's focused on letting me take back control of my own life and create a great future for my family. So that is, to answer your question, one of the reasons why we've had such incredible success over the last 2 years.
Okay, so there's a lot of distrust, generally speaking, in relationship to, I would say, establishment organizations and political elites all across the West. A lot of that well-earned. Why should Canadians believe that the vision that you just laid out is something that you hold personally dear and not merely what would you say, a set of carefully calculated campaign slogans?
Well, I look back at everything I've done for my entire political career to the time I was a teenager. You know, some people even dug up my old university essays, and I've been saying precisely the same thing the entire time. When I was 20, I wrote an essay as Prime Minister I would, and the title was Building Canada on Freedom. And the entire piece was about making the government small and maximizing personal freedom. So that's basically what I'm doing now.
So you have consistency
well, there were
going
things,
for you.
when I launched my leadership race, I literally had the same language in my leadership launch speech that I had put in that essay 22 or 23 years earlier. And when I was part of the Harper government, we basically fought for and did the same things then that I'm proposing to do now. So as much as you can be assured of anything any political leader says, I've got evidence to back it up.
Okay, so one of the things that's been very distressing to observe, I would say, and I'm going to use the UK as an example. I mean, the UK had 14 straight years of Conservative government.
Yeah.
And, as far as I'm concerned, thank God for that, because it could have been Labour. But having said that, they fell 100% prey to the blandishments of the net zero types and brought forward really a catastrophic energy policy. And the UK is suffering dreadfully for that. And their immigration policy, Keir Starmer apologized for it, which was something remarkable to behold, and so did Kemi Badenoch, who now runs the Conservatives in the UK. Now, the reason I'm bringing them up as an example is because, well, they were a Conservative government, and they certainly didn't govern by anything approximating Conservative principles. And so how do you feel about the probability that if the Conservatives in Canada take power, that they'll be enticed into this global utopian delusion that seems to have enveloped so many leaders, kind of regardless of their political stripe. What do you think, if anything, can inoculate you or has inoculated you against that?
I know better.
Well, elaborate. What do you mean?
I'm not going to do that. And it will be hard because the temptation will be, this is the mistake that conservative parties around the world have made countless times. They think, well, anybody who's got a conservative mindset is already voting for me, so I can go off and chase the ideas of my political opponents, and then everyone will love me because I'll have the conservatives due to the fact that I have the name conservative, and then I'll have all these other people because I've embraced their contrary direction. And in the short term, it works because you manage to have all of these people under, and all of the different political ideologies captured in one tent. But the problem happens when the policies are a disaster. And then people wake up and go, oh my God, my taxes are now up, the inflation is out of control, the deficit is spiraling, there's crime on the streets. So does the temptation exist to try and take on the political policies of the socialists in the short term? Sure, but it's one that I will fiercely resist because I know that by the fourth year of my mandate, people would be enraged because their lives would be even worse. So it will be tough, though. Like, it's going to be a trade-off.
You can see the temptation. I mean, I think many leaders fall prey to the temptation to shine on the international stage, right? I mean, I can't remember who it was in the UK. I believe it was the previous Labour Party leader who said that decisions in Westminster were essentially irrelevant because all the important things were happening internationally, right? And so if people are involved in status climbing and they hit the national pinnacle, there's the international world to, what would you say, to dominate or to impress. And that's, I think that the power of that temptation or even of that peer pressure can't be underestimated. So, okay, so now you've been, these 600 events that you've gone to, so let's say that's something approximating 1,000 to 1,200 since we last talked. You spent a lot of time speaking to, and I presume listening to, ordinary Canadians. I heard you make a speech in the House of Commons that went viral in the last couple of weeks, and you spoke very persuasively on behalf of working class Canadians. And so tell us what you've learned, what you've heard over the last couple of years, and how that's shaped you and changed you, let's say, as you've moved from, as you shifted your position up the political hierarchy and are poised, really likely to take the reins in Canada at some point in the next year. You've listened to all these people, and so what have you learned, and what has it made you convinced of, let's say?
Well, first of all, there's the bad news and the good news. The bad news is that people feel like they've done absolutely everything right, and their lives are trapped. Young people say, look, okay, I went through, I got an education, I work nonstop, and I have made the calculation that there is no mathematical path for me to own a house. It's just not possible. In Toronto here, for example, if you take the average income and the average house price, it would take you 29 years to save up for a down payment. So, if you're
for a down payment,
not to pay it off, forget paying it off. And so if you're a young woman who's got a biological clock, obviously, well, do the math. You start off at, let's say you're 25. Well, you're going to be in your 50s before you can afford the average house. So how are you ever going to have kids? And
that's about the time when people think about downsizing from their house.
That's what they used to think about downsizing. And, they usually had their house paid off back by the time they were in their early 50s. So just to show how dreadfully things have worsened, that's the picture of the youth. Then there's the kind of middle-aged people who do have kids already, and they're terrified of the dangers in the streets. I mean, our streets are just being overtaken by drugs and gangsterism, and other dangers, and they want safety again. And then you have business owners that are saying there's just no way to continue to compete in Canada We have to look at moving, and that means the next 200 jobs we create is going to be in Ohio or Florida or some other place than Canada. That's the kind of overview that I get. The good news, though, is that people do now have some hope. They think that things can be turned around, and they have clearly and correctly diagnosed the problem, which is entirely political. There is no physical, geographic reason why Canada should struggle to supply people with great opportunities of home ownership and family formation. In fact, we should be the richest country in the world. And people increasingly know that, and they know that if we make the right, albeit difficult, political decisions, that they will once again be able to do as their parents did, which is to say, get a house, start a family, live in a safe neighborhood, raise their kids with good traditional values. That's another thing I'm finding, is that a lot of people are really getting back to those values that we were told were unfashionable. They want, young people today, they want to have families.
Yeah, well, there's been a real conservative swing, especially among young men. Well, no wonder, because they've been demonized for 30 straight years for every aspect of their masculinity, from their play preferences to their proclivity to destroy the planet with their ambition. And so there's definitely an opportunity there. And clearly your political party and you are capitalizing on that you have the support from young people increasingly right across Canada.
We are winning among youth. In fact, the youth were the first to come on board with me. My rallies were overwhelmingly populated with youth, which is not normal for conservatives.
Pierre becomes Prime Minister. Canadians should be ready to buckle up for a ride towards a future that actually feels possible, not just in theory, but in real tangible ways. Forget the grandiose, save the planet speeches that seem to do nothing except skyrocket energy costs. Pierre's vision is focused on what really matters, making sure hard work translates into a paycheck that can actually buy you food, a nice home, a safe neighborhood. And no, he's not talking about just a theatrical future. He's talking about bringing back a kind of stability that people actually need to thrive. Under Trudeau's reign, Canadians are grappling with harsh reality of unattainable housing and inflation eating away at their savings. Meanwhile, Pierre's been out there actually talking to people, not just spitting out political sound bites. He gets it. Young people are starting to realize that a house is out of reach, families are struggling to stay safe, and businesses are fleeing to friendlier shores. But here's the twist. Pierre isn't sitting back and watching the downward spiral. He's taking action, offering hope, and showing that the path to prosperity isn't just a pipe dream. In short, if Pierre takes the reins, it's not just a change of government, it's a change of direction. Forget the hollow promises of the past. With Pierre, Canadians might just get back to what they do best, owning a home, raising a family, and living with dignity in a country that actually works for them. And let's face it, anything's better than another 4 years of let's buy an electric car and pretend everything's fine. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more. And until then, stay bold, stay true.